And okay, so the content of today is checking our course assignment, finding out what needs to be handed in, and then I made an example of a hand-in folder where all of these things are inside of. So this is making sure that we hand everything correctly in for Monday. Okay, so in this course assignment, this is the course assignment file. It says that you're supposed to hand in different things. Of course, it says that you're supposed to hand in some things on the 26th of April, which you did, which was a style guide and a scoreboard. But these also need to be contained inside of the hand-in on Monday. So actually, style guide and scoreboard 1 is also a part of this hand-in. It needs to all be there when you hand it in. Okay, so if I just scroll down, this is part of the details of what the magazine contains. And so let's just instead look at this part, because this is actually where you see everything that needs to be handed in. And some details will be located on this page right here. So, but here is actually where it states what's supposed to be handed in. So on the right, and this might be hard to see if you're on a mobile screen viewing this, it might actually be hard to see these file names because it's going to be very tiny. So I suggest that you watch this on a computer screen so you're actually able to see what it says right here. Okay, so I made a folder called Hand In 10th of May, and this is actually what's supposed to be handed in. Okay, so it's supposed to be, like it says here, a report based on the report format described in Rapport OPD English. So you will be handing in a report. In the file names is some important information about what the different files need to contain. For example, I sometimes notice that students include their appendix to the report as separate files. So that's why in this case I wrote report containing appendix. Appendix pages for the report will be inside of the report. So remember, if you have appendix pages with some analysis or some creative stuff that you made during your process, well, if you point to an appendix in your report, then the appendix should be inside the report. So that should be one file containing the report and any appendixes used in the report. So don't include appendixes as separate files. Be sure that they are located in the end of the report so we can actually always read the appendix directly in the report file. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first thing you need of these 5 different things. The report needs to be handed in. And the next thing, which was something you actually already handed in, is the style guide. So this style guide, I wrote 2 just so we can see. This is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4, and so on. So the style guide, which needs to be handed in, was handed in already, but perhaps you updated it since then. So I just wrote updated version. If you made some changes to the style guide because you discovered there was some grids and some layout rules that wasn't working as it was supposed to, well, then you could have made an updated version. And of course, that would be the version that you hand in on Monday. You might not have updated your style guide, and then that's okay. But if you updated it, then it's the updated version we need to see. So make sure that the updated version is handed in if you have an updated version. Okay, so, and you know, the style guide, in this style guide, there's for some reason crop marks. There's no reason for a style guide to contain crop marks. This is just a random assignment I found from another group. There's no reason that the style guide actually have crop marks, because the style guide is something we'll watch on screen. And if it did contain crop marks, of course, then we should be using the bleed edge as well. And the bleed edge isn't being used right here. But since the style guide will normally be viewed on screen, there's no point in handing it in with crop marks for print. So I suggest handing that in without crop marks, without bleed, without any of these control marks included. Yes, okay, so that's the second thing, the style guide. The third thing is the magazine, and I made a folder for that because that's actually a lot of files. That's all of the files that's noted up here on the previous page. The magazine hand-in should contain these different things, but all of these things should actually be included as one magazine file instead of separate files. So the content of the magazine should actually be one file, and the cover should be a separate file. And of course, then the digital flat plan should also be a separate file, because the digital flat plan itself has nothing to do with the actual content pages of the magazine. So of course that needs to be a separate file. And I've just shown how that can be done, because I suggest handing the cover in as one file, the cover in as one file, and the content files, the content pages as two files. And we'll just discuss how they could be saved. Okay, the digital flat plan, straightforward, just make sure that you have a flat plan showing how the articles are located inside of your magazine. And there's different ways to do that. This is just one way. Like I said, this was just from one group, and it's cool that you made it in a different way. Okay, so the cover page. The cover, I suggest handing in containing crop and bleed, saved for print, so we can actually see that you know how to save the cover for print. So I'll just open that up and we can see how that would look. This is again the same group which handed in their cover file, and normally a cover would also contain the inside pages, for this front page, this cover front page. There would normally be something on the opposite side of the page. This file does not contain that, but normally you would have inside pages as well. But yeah, so if you wanted to make it perfect, of course there should be an inside page for the front page and also the back page of the cover. But this is saved correctly. This is saved using crop marks, using bleed edge, and there's also included all these control marks. So this is saved correctly for print, and you can actually see that it's saved correctly for print as well on the spine. You notice that here on the spine. I'll just zoom in. We can actually see that there's registration marks defining where the spine is supposed to be folded, right? So that's saved correct for print. So the cover is one file. Then the content files are two files, showing the one file showing that you can actually save correctly for print. So this is how you would hand it in if it's saved for print as single pages. So if I scroll through this, you'll notice that each and every page is single pages. And I'll just show you how to save for single pages in a second. But this is saving correctly for print when you're supposed to actually print the magazine content pages and put them inside of the spine and glue them there. And of course, this would be printed in duplex, print on both sides of the paper, but it will be single page layout. So since it's duplex print, that means the first page will have on the back of it this second page, right? And the next page will be a page for itself. It will have on its opposite side, on the back of it, it will have this page, and so on, right? So that way we know always when printing a magazine, it's two pages are connected. The right page is connected with the left page on the next page. These two actually are one piece of paper. These two pages, they will be one piece of paper, each on the different sides of each other. So this is the front of the paper, this is the back of the paper. front of a new paper, back of that new paper, and so on. Yes, so one that's saved correctly for print, just so we know that you can actually save correct for print as a graphic design student. Okay, the second content file, magazine content file you'll save is one that's made as spreads containing no crop and no bleed, meaning that this is for digital viewing. So I'll just show you that. The first page, of course, since it's located on the right, it will not be as a spread. But you'll notice the next two pages will be shown as spreads, meaning that this is much easier for evaluation to be looking at, because you'll actually see the magazine pages as they're supposed to be, located next to each other. And that's how you would normally read a magazine. So this is the file that we'll actually be using at evaluation to go through your magazine and look at what have you actually made design-wise for your magazine. So that's the main reason this file is important, because it's going to be very hard to evaluate. It's going to be very hard to evaluate. It's going to be very hard to evaluate your magazine content by just looking at one page at a time. We need to see them next to each other, so we got a clear impression of how they look next to each other. Otherwise, we only get half an impression. So that's why these three files are relevant to hand in for your hand in on Monday. The cover, which is made ready for print, the content pages saved as single page layout, which has crop marks and bleed for print, and the content actually the same file, the content file, but with no crop marks and no bleed, because it's made ready for digital viewing instead of print. Yeah, so that's what the magazine content is. So that's everything that's noted up here. They're just saved as these 4 different files, 2 content page files, and 1 cover page file, and 1 digital flat plan. So that makes 4 files all in all. Some students actually hand in each and every one of their articles. If you do that, there's a high likeliness that we don't check all of them, because that's going to be a lot of files, and it's just going to be, we're not going to have an idea of how they actually look inside the entire magazine. So it's much better that you just include them, as where you can see them all come in, a flow, so you get an impression of how this entire magazine will look. So make sure that all of these different files inside of the magazine is actually in 1 content page file. Yes, okay. So again, these 2 files, the content page files, are actually the same content. It's just exported in 2 different ways, one for print and the other for digital viewing. Okay, so the next part of the process is to hand in the filled out versions of scoreboard 1 and 2. You already made scoreboard 1. So this will just you can make a folder if you want. It doesn't have to be in a folder. You can also just hand them in scoreboard 1 and 2. But scoreboard 1 and 2 needs to be there, filled out, of course. And last but not least, there needs to be a work portfolio. And I named this work portfolio with 4 required items. And that's because if I scroll up to where it talks about work portfolio, you'll notice that it says the work portfolio needs to contain your collaboration agreement, your work process, your project plan, containing network diagram and Gantt diagram, and dates for all kind of meetings and decisions. So instead of including this as 4 separate files, it's much easier if you just include this as 1 file, 1 work portfolio containing all of these 4 different things. I have noticed a lot of students handing in where it actually where it's 4 different files. Well, that makes it much less accessible for me, because then I have to have 4 files open on my computer. It's much easier that you actually just hand it in as one work portfolio PDF containing these 4 different things. So, and okay, so if you didn't prepare it like that, if you actually made it as 4 different files, well, then you can just combine them in Acrobat. You can go to File and you can say Create, and then you can choose Combine Files into a single PDF. So you could just take your 4 different files and combine them into being one PDF. So that's really the simplest thing to do inside of Acrobat. Of course, it will require that you have Acrobat installed, but if I click combine files into a PDF, you can just add those files that is required. Let's say I'm going to just take these 2 files and add them, and you'll notice that it will show these 2 files are now next to each other, and I'll just click combine, and out of that comes a file containing all of these pages from several PDF files. And you'll of course then click File, Save, and save this as, you know, work portfolio. And then you'll have a work portfolio containing all your 4 different sections. Yeah. And then remember to save it, otherwise it's just gonna, you know, delete itself. So save it, and then you'll have a work portfolio with your 4 different required items, with the collaboration agreement, work process, project plan, and dates for all kind of meetings and decisions. Okay, super. So include all of these 4 things into one file called work portfolio. So let's just be sure that we know how to save this magazine correctly. These 3 different files that we need to know how to save those correctly. And to do that, I prepared some files called examples up here. So I'll just go into that. And this is these, I'll just call this content pages. So here, let's assume I have a cover page, the cover pages of the magazine saved as one file, and the content page is saved as a separate file. Okay, so let's take the cover pages first. And this is the most beautiful cover you've probably ever seen. Up here we have the front of the cover on the right, and we have the back of the cover on the left, and we have a spine in the center. And this is set up correctly in my master pages. You know, there's actually 3 pages here. This is actually a separate page, this one in the center, because you can see that up in the master. I can actually go right click on my master, say master options for a master, and I'll see that it says this is actually 3 pages. So this is made correctly. I'll click undo, so the spine goes back where it's supposed to be located. Okay, so there's one thing that you need to be sure. Sometimes when you're viewing your cover in preview, you won't be looking at the bleed edges. So what happens is, now if you click export, you'll notice after exporting that something is wrong. And this will never happen if you just remember to switch off preview and just check the edges of every page. So I by choice, I made a mistake in this document, so I can just see that mistake immediately if I click W. So I click W, and I've always wondered why in English it's not just called double V, but let's not talk about that now. Okay, so it shows out that actually I have some blue not going all the way to the bleed edge right here. So always remember to check for that. And right now I cannot access this because this is actually an error on my master page. And if this is an error on the master page, it will affect any page that's left. It will also affect the back, right? So I'll make sure to go up to my master page and then readjust. I'll just double click on my master page, then readjust this So I'm certain that all the color goes all the way to the bleed edge. And now I'll go back to my back page, and you'll see that the color now goes over the bleed edge. So that's perfect, and it will be the same for the inside of the cover. Okay, so just so everyone knows how a cover typically would look, it would have a front, a back, and a spine, but also inside of the cover, you know that you cannot have blank pages on the inside of a cover because the you know that's just a waste of good pages. So if this is 250 grams glossy paper, why not use the inside so it doesn't become white on the inside? So the inside, the front page on the back of that will actually, this will be the left page down here. So front and inside front, these right is connected to left, and back here on the left is connected to the right inside. So these will be, when you print it, the front page on the cover will be the left page on the inside. Likewise, the back of the cover, which is on the left, will be on the right on the inside. Okay, so that's just to clarify what a cover typically contains. And when you export this for PDF, you'll say edit, export. I don't know what I'm talking about. File export, of course. I just woke up. I'm excused. And then, of course, I'll save this. I'll just save this on my desktop. No, actually, let's just save it inside of this examples thing. Okay, so I'll save it as cover pages, and of course my magazine would probably be named something, so perhaps I'll give it a name, cover name, and you know, if I want to clarify what this is for, I could write for print with bleed and crop. I'll just save that, and then of course we'll set these settings correct. You have Regis guidance for that and Regis compendiums for that. So I'll just stick with what's up here. The only thing that's really important here for me is that you remember to switch on spreads. So it might be saying pages, well then you click spreads, then you'll be sure that the cover pages will be next to each other. It will look absolutely horrendous if you save it as single pages, because then actually it will be back, then spine as one, back as one page, spine as one page, front as one page. It's gonna be 6 pages all in all if you save as single pages. So save as spread, so it's just gonna be 2 pages, the back and front with the spine, and the inside front and back with the spine. So I'll save as spreads, and I'll of course remember to include marks and bleeds, and remember down here to include bleed. Often some of you just switch these on and forget to switch this on, the bleed and slug. And the bleed is important because otherwise there will be no color going out over the edge of the document towards the bleed edge. So all of these needs to be switched on. Well, printer mark needs to be switched on, and bleed needs to be switched on. And you know, then some of you decide perhaps to switch off registration marks and color bars and so on. That's up to you, which you think is necessary. But of course, crop and bleed needs to be there, and document bleed settings needs to be there. And this is correct now. So the only thing I actually did in here was choose spreads, and then go into marks and bleeds and switch on marks and switch on bleed and slug. That's the only thing I actually did. So I'll click export. And a result of that should be on my desktop right now. So I'll just check how that looks. And you'll notice that this is saved correctly. It has crop, bleed, and you see both the front and the back and the spine as it's supposed to. And you see the inside, front and back and spine with bleed and crop marks as it's supposed to. So this is saved correctly for print. This is how we want you to hand in the cover file. Okay, so the next thing we'll look at is the content pages. So like I said before, the content pages will be just one file, but you'll export it as one for print and one for digital viewing. And I just made this random, very ugly, magazine layout. And also here, remember to check throughout your entire magazine to see if all items go all the way to the edge. Because if you're in preview mode, you will not notice this. You will not notice that some things are not going all the way to the bleed edge. So I'll just click preview off by clicking W, and then I notice, hey, there's actually an element down here which of color that does not go all the way to the bleed edge. Well, this is located, I can see this is an A master, so this will be located on my A article up here because it's not just one page, it's actually several pages. You see also here on page 6, it has the color not going all the way to the bleach. My LA master is based actually on the A master. So if I click here on the LA master, it doesn't go to the bleed edge either, but I'll just update my A master by dragging that all the way to the edge. And that both updates the LA master, which was based on the A master, and it updates the physical pages, the document pages in my magazine. So both pages based on the A master and pages based on the LA master actually now has the color going all the way to the bleed edge. Okay, so now we're certain that everything looks as it's supposed to. So the next thing I'll do is actually export this correctly. And let's assume this document contains all the magazine articles you're supposed to hand in. Of course, that will be more pages than this, but let's assume that all pages are here. Okay, how to export it then? Well, you'll say File, Export, and let's just do it for print first. So this is going to be content pages for print. And I'll click Save for that. Actually, I'll not save it on my desktop. I'll save it in the hand-in example. So content pages for print. And of course, again, like I said, check Regis compendiums to be sure which standard to save it in. But the most important thing for me here is that you save it as single pages, because this is for print. A magazine will not have 4 pages on one piece of paper. No, it will have 2 pages on one piece of paper. Like I said before, the first page on the left will have the next page on the right printed on it. So it's just going to be 2 pages. What I'm showing here essentially is that page 1 of my magazine, I'm showing over here on the pages, page 1 of my magazine will have on the back of it page 2. And then again, when printed, page 3 will have page 4 on the back, and page 5 will have page 6 on the back. And that's the procedure for how it will be printed. So that's why it needs to be single pages, because then you just set your printer to print duplex. And then they come out 1 with 2 on the back, 3 with 4 on the back, and so on. And then you'll just put all the pages down into the glue spine, and you'll heat up the glue. And then when it's cold, the magazine pages will be attached to the cover with the glue spine inside of it. So this is the way you'll save it correctly for print. So it's going to be single pages. So we get that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 procedure. But it's also going to include all printer marks and the bleed and slug, so it's saved correctly for print. So I'll just click Export. And before I go and view my export file, I'll just save it as for digital viewing as well. So I'll say File, Export, and I'll just choose for my file, and this time I'll call it for digital viewing, and you could also just call it for screen, right? And it's still going to be Adobe PDF for print, but you could if you wanted to, you could set it to be smaller file size. I'm just going to keep it high quality print. But what's important is I'll save it as spreads. But since we're viewing it on screen, there's no point in having crop marks and bleed edge, because you don't need to print. You don't, the crop marks and the bleed edge is for printing, because when you crop it with your cutters, your cutting machine, well, they'll need the printing marks and the bleed edge. But since this is for viewing on screen, there's absolutely no reason to have that for viewing on screen. So I'll just remove all those marks and the bleed. So the only thing essential we have right here is actually the one called spreads. So the pages will be located next to each other. So I'll just export this. And now we have them saved correctly. So I'm just going to minimize this window. And let's check how they look. So I'm just going to open both of these. The first up here, called content pages for print, you notice that it actually has both crop marks and bleed edge, and it's one page after the other. So this is how it will look if it's saved correctly for print as a magazine. Okay, and for screen viewing, the first page will always be alone, because this suggests that it's the cover, because it's the page on the right. But afterwards, all pages will be shown next to each other, as you normally would see things when you scroll through a magazine, when you flip through a magazine in the real world, when you buy a magazine and flip through it. So this is essentially how we would like to see it presented at evaluation, you know, showing, okay, this is a lifestyle magazine, and this is how it will look overall, not just one page at a time, but how it will look with these two pages next to each other. Yeah, so that's how to save it correctly as a cover for print, as the content pages for print, but also the content pages, since we'll be viewing that for evaluation, and it will affect the impression, also how to save it for screen. And this is how the optimal hand-in would be made. So a report containing the appendix, a style guide, perhaps an updated version, a magazine containing the two versions of the content pages, the one version of the cover, and a digital flat plan, the two scoreboards, and the work portfolio containing the 4 different items we discussed. This is how we would like the files handed in, and that all in all will result in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 files. Yeah. I think I'm done talking. This is how we would prefer it. If you hand it in as more files, for example, you have your each and every different articles for each and every different group members, you can do that, but this is how we would prefer it. This, if you hand it in like this, you have handed in everything correctly. You are recording. Okay, so if I want to export this file for stapling, if this is not going to be a regular magazine for glueback, but instead for saddle stitch, then there's a different way of doing it. You need to have one connected to page 8, 2 to 7, 3 to 6, and 4 to 5 if this is an 8-page document. Okay, so you do that by going to File, Print Booklet. Here you check in preview if everything looks correctly, and right now it looks correctly, everything. So I'm just going to mess that up because I actually did something different, and you know, so most likely it will look more like this, for example, when you get into this menu. So it will show that there's not enough page, there's not there's no bleed marks, and so on and so on. So just to be sure that everything is set up correctly, we go into print settings. And in here in print settings, you need to make sure that it's going to be saved as a PostScript file. And yeah, then it could be, you know, for some specific printer, that just means that it will be saved using the SMUG profiles and so on for that printer. You could also tell it to be device independent. You might have an easier time in setup if you put it to be a specific printer, because then the setup will show those paper sizes available for that printer. So I'm going to choose the Canon printer for the school. And I'll just choose the setup to be, since this is an A4, two A4 pages next to each other, I'm going to need a page size, which is A3 oversize. So I'm going to choose SRA3, which is super size A3. And I'm going to include marks and bleed. And I'll click OK. And now it will say that the page is the right side. It's just not in the correct orientation. So I'll go to print settings again. And I'll choose for the layout to be landscape format. And of course, I'll set the page position to be centered. Otherwise, if I click upper left, you'll notice that it will have more at the upper left of the page than at the bottom right. And that will affect when page 8 and 1 are printed with page 2 and 7 on the back of those pages. So, of course, this will create a huge offset value, so the bleed will not match on both sides. So I'll need to, in my print settings, be sure that the page position is set to centered, and then I'll just click OK, and I'll click print, because this looks correct. Page 1 next to page 8, 2 next to 7, 3 next to 6, and 4 next to 5. And I'll just click print. Content pages, saddle stitch. This is only relevant for the people who will staple it at the back. It's not relevant for people who use glue back. So this is when you have something you fold and then you staple it at the back. Okay, so I'll click to save this, and we'll just check on my desktop how this looks. I have it right here. Notice that it's a PostScript file, but just open that up with preview and check if it looks correctly. And it seems that it looks correct. It seems like it's supposed to look. This is set up for printing on an A3 oversized page, and it looks correctly. So I'm gonna choose to save that inside of my preview save. And this is just to avoid using Distiller. No reason that you have to get acquainted with an entirely new program that you're not used to using. You save it as a PDF, and of course you save it, you know, I don't know, call it finished. That's just so I can identify it on the desktop. And then I'm going to close my preview document, and I'm just going to find it as a PDF. This is a PDF now. It's no longer a PostScript file. It's a PDF. And then we're certain that everyone can view it as it's supposed to be viewed, as a PDF. So this is how you'll save your saddle stitch document. And if you want to show this for digital viewing, you should save it as you would normally save a magazine for glueback. Because if you save it without the crop marks and the bleed marks now, it's going to make absolutely no sense for, you know, the teachers watching this, because page 1 will be next to page 8, page 7 will be next to page 2, and so on. So this will make absolutely no sense for the viewers, because it will not be the same article you're watching. You're actually watching the front of the magazine and next to the back of the magazine. So there's gonna be no system here. So of course, when exporting this for screen viewing, the saddle stitch version, you'll instead simply just export it. Then you'll just export, as I showed before, export for digital viewing, and click save, and then you'll just save it as spreads and make sure that there's no marks and bleeds. So you'll save for digital viewing the same way as any other group. So there's actually a logical sequence to the pages when watching it on screen. So the one for print is going to look absolutely weird because page 1 is next to page 8, or 1 is next to page 16, and so on. But the one for digital viewing should be so page 2 is next to page 3, page 4 is next to page 5, and so on. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that.